It is great to be connecting with you here. I've been a resident of Boulder for 10 years now, and I'm excited and honored that they are now carrying two of my books. This video is about one of them, Miracles in the Naked Light. And as I give you a brief synopsis, I don't think that I can do so without saying a word about me. From my earliest years, I've been a mystic adventurer, largely impelled by my experiences of time seeming to stop and the deeper nature of reality opening itself up to me. It's formed a cosmology within me that is one of the only things in my life journey this time around the sun that has not changed. And that is that everything is being and becoming in and as consciousness. Now, when I had my early childhood experiences, I used the word God, and I'm still comfortable with that word. But since God is a word that can have a pretty heavy connotation and lead people to close doors or open them, I prefer the word consciousness, which has a bit more of a resonance of what is true to me. So this book is a standalone book. You can read it from start to finish and have a really awesome, satisfying experience. And that being said, it's the second book in a trilogy, which unearths some of the deep evolution within myself that happened during my 10.5 years as a Carmelite cloistered monastic nun. Now, I always give my yeses in life. I'm a big yes person. Dropping in, experiencing inspiration of the ineffable at my center and saying yes to it. And my language is oftentimes using the word beloved because I experience a great interpersonal quality to this dance of being alive, if you will. So this comes after Love Calls, Insights of a Former Carmelite Nun, and it comes before the final chapter of my having been a monastic nun. It opens up a story of my own emergence and my own experience of everything as grace within the container of monastic life and also within the container of being called as a 29-year-old woman that had just lived in silence for 6 years to be the general contractor, one of the designers, and one of the principal fundraisers for our monastery that ended up being 17,000 square foot, worth more than $9 million. Isn't that crazy? And I was called into that role, and it's the experience of what happens when we say yes to inspiration with all our being, and how we step into the unknown to have the amazing miracle of being alive show forth through us, within us, around us, as a beautiful manifestation. So for me, even though this is about a monastery, we each have our monasteries. It's a symbol, if you will, of the greatness that we are all called to. That's a brief synopsis of the journey. And I really invite everyone to step into anything that I do, to step into it, not taking what I say as true, but letting what I say be an opportunity to discover your truth, to discover yourself in a new way, to discover reality in a new way. I mentioned that it lays out my experience of everything as grace. And in my introduction, I say a couple words that I think might be nice to share with you here. It is a tricky postulation to claim as true. At face value, everything is grace. It could be used to diminish, bypass, repress, or deny the human experience of suffering. Drawing close to life through this statement, however, can reveal a very different kind of reality. One where all the joys and sorrows, all the manifold blessings and horrific atrocities are seen and held. This being seen and held opens horizons to new ways of being and seeing. So it gives you a sense of the journey you will go on. The book is not about teaching you something. It's about sharing experientially so that the guru within you, the source within you, can reveal what you are meant to awaken to. What inspired me to share? That is such a manifold question. In the largest way and the most comprehensive way, I think it's important that we share our experience of what is beyond words. Because that way we give fragrance to the field of creation. We give voice to the voiceless that's creating through us. We connect on ways that are tapping into our essential nature, that are perhaps the most important. And since my life, ever since I was 5, is caught up in that mystery, I can't not share. It's my playground. It's the place I learn and change. It's the way in which I connect with not only every human being, but every part of creation. So I love it when people share on these levels, and that's my motivation for sharing. Second to that, communication seems to be one of my particular gifts as this divine love coming into form, or this consciousness coming into form. Communication has been a way that spirit moves through me in written word, in spoken word, in leading meditation, in being a friend on the journey so others step into the silence where all sound is heard in its purest form. Communication is that for me. So that inspired me to share as well. And there's another reason too. This project deserves to be celebrated. I worked so intimately with hundreds of individuals that gave with all their hearts and souls, and it's my way of celebrating their goodness. Some of the names are changed. Some of them, I found them after 20 years and they gave permission for their names to be used. But whether you know them by name or not, what they did deserves to be shouted out on the rooftops so that it's out there in the universe and lets us touch into the benevolence that's at the core of our being. Our world is filled with so much contrast, so much suffering, so much uncertainty. Every time we speak or touch in on inspiration, we build each other up. So it's, in a way, my thank you to all these wonderful people. Now, I got a question from someone who took a look at the book that they asked me to share in this video, and that is, what do I mean when I use the phrase ineffable source? Well, the etymology of the word ineffable is unutterable, that words actually can't really accurately speak to in an encompassing way what we're talking about. My experience of source is largely a non-verbal grasping. That's probably why I love poetry as much as I do, and probably my favorite form of communication, because it is, again, using the word fragrance, it's like a fragrance of what can't be captured by word. But words are doorways and portals. If we let the word open us to an experience, I think words serve their purpose. When I use the words ineffable source, I'm speaking about an all-encompassing, eternal impetus that I would say is consciousness, impetus that is both created and uncreated, and there's no conflict there. That is both transcendent and immanent, and there's no conflict there. That is both the source from which all comes and is the source in which everything is being and living. So it's a way of penetrating these paradoxical statements that we can say, ineffable source. Now, my favorite word for that, as I mentioned earlier, is beloved. But beloved has a very particular, more narrow framework. And so it's not quite as accurate if I'm going to be put on my theological hat, which is part of my training as a theologian. So ineffable source is a bit more theologically resonant for me. Now, I've talked about this project because that's part of the synopsis of the book. When I was a Carmelite nun, I had been in the monastery in North Dakota from the age of 24 to 29. And before I took solemn vows, and solemn vows are vows that you take for life. So even that probably piques your curiosity, right? Because if I took vows for life, what am I doing on this video here? Why am I not still with shaved head and clad in habit? That's a whole nother story. And that comes in the book that follows Miracles in the Naked Light. At a certain point in North Dakota, I was asked if I would join a monastery in Texas. It was a daughter community. So all the nuns came from North Dakota, and they were creating what is called a new foundation that was anchored out of San Angelo, Texas. They had struggled for many years, which I didn't know when I said yes, because I was in novitiate, I was in formation, and I was not privy to a lot about the monastery in Texas. I followed a divine call, and that call came from an experience I had of Mary Theotokos. Now, in saying yes to that call, I went down to Texas thinking, because I was younger than the other nuns by 20 to 30 years, and I thought being part of this hierarchical establishment, I would be doing what I loved, scrubbing toilets and floors and cooking. I had no idea I would be called into saying yes to an amazing project, which this book gives you a direct hand experience. You get to taste what it's like when somebody gives a big yes as a mirror and a reflection to the yeses that are a part of your own life. And I said yes to building a monastery coming from a silent inspiration that happened in the backyard of our small converted house in San Angelo. That was part of a larger movement of spirit that percolated within our community and with our extended community in San Angelo, and led to this project where we were donated 640 acres of land, where people of all backgrounds, I was a Catholic nun, but people were inspired of all backgrounds to be a part of this project because they were moved. They gave their own yeses. So the project itself inspired hope, inspired belonging, inspired connection, inspired them to say yes with all the gifts they have, whether it was their time, whether it was their skills as subcontractors or engineers, whether it was money. Everyone gave from what they had. And this tells that story. It tells the story of how each of us is so valued in saying our yes. We are an important part of the equation, and we are part of a glorious equation where everyone is valued. Everyone has a place. Everyone has meaning. So the project itself is a microcosm, what I believe our macrocosm of creation is. And the project ended debt-free. If you want a little nugget of this, you can watch my TEDx talk. But in the book, you'll see the way the project ended debt-free. It was not traditional at all. If you have been a part of any construction project or anything that involved a lot of needs of funds, your jaw will probably drop as you find the kinds of scenarios that allowed this project to come into form, because it did not start with a big upfront budget. It did not start by having all our working prints in place. It did not start by having traditional disciplines hired. We literally rode the yes day after day after day, as everyone else did. That's amazing. That story in and of itself is worthy of reading this book. Now, I was also asked to share something about this story that I thought wasn't possible that came into reality. And I have to say that in building the monastery, there was not one time that I felt something was impossible. I think the fruit of giving my big yes to being a monastic and the years of living in silence, the years of hours and hours of meditation and chant and living off the land had cultivated an inner availability to me that didn't have doubt in the face of this project. There wasn't one time within me that in the face of the project wondered, how is this going to happen? How are we going to get 100,000 pounds of stone donated? That thought never even crossed my mind. So I can't give a story there. But what I can speak to, which I think we can all relate to, is I ran into an inner challenge along this journey. And that challenge had to do with my own commitment to my vows, in my commitment to the divine. I'm sure you can relate. It doesn't take being in vows to relate to this experience. When I gave my yes to my vows, there was such an ecstatic experience of the love exchange between me and this eternal source I call the beloved. So much so that even though I'm not in Carmelite vows, that still remains a brilliant part of my being today. And yet it's free of the vows, and yet it remains part of my essential truth. Well, there came a point in this journey of saying yes to this project while being in the container of my vows that my total surrender to the vows was running up against challenges of wondering, where is God in this? Because whenever we say yes to something really big coming into form, we come into the manifestation process that shines a light on everything. The dark and the light of humanity, the dark and the light seeming of all creation, so that we can break through to discover everything as light. Well, I came into the dark and light within myself, within the collective consciousness of Catholicism, within the collective consciousness of what it means to be holy, within the collective consciousness that surrounded the project, that touched upon all the people and the events of the project. And within that, I had deep moments of wondering, what am I being faithful to here? And I wondered at a certain point, will I ever move through this? Because I had not yet had the breakthrough of the black and white that I was being initiated in beyond. So when we say yes to something external, a commitment to a relationship, a commitment to an organization, a commitment to a vow, eventually destruction is part of that process so that our liberation can continue to happen with our being. That was a necessary part of my process, but at a certain point I wondered, because the conflict was so great within me and I did not have the insight, how can I move through this? Will I ever move through this? Will I ever move through this? I didn't know how it was going to be possible. And eventually I was worked over by that, and there was a major breakthrough that penetrated the paradox and led to further freedom for me. I don't want to give you the whole story on that because I want you to discover it step by step by step. So that is a bit about me. I hope that you can get a sense that I'm a mystic adventurer, that like Gandhi, and maybe I'm still learning the degree of surrender that he exemplifies. My life is an experiment in the truth. And so even in writing, I know even in the writing, it falls short. The words fall short. So my hope and my prayer is that you will allow the words to be a container that you get to experience the dynamic, in an effortless way, the dynamic, pulsing, ineffable source of your own being. So I want to read an excerpt, and I want to start with the poem, because the poem at the front, that's part of my dedication, situates the story. Wrap your fingers around the rim of your heart, pounding, pounding, pounding. It is the only way to feel the exultant throb that edges your toes to the cliff. It is the only way to jump, to exhale descent into the Kali mystery. Why keeps dripping down our chins, but the eternal heart is beating, 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 reminding you, me, us, friends, that we are too far gone. Freedom crests like curling waves, steadily reaching its fingers to grab us and take us. To take us high, high, so high, into the erotic embrace of the one beauty. I'm not sure how we learned about him. He seemed to be carried like an angel into our lives. A cloud of dust preceded the loud diesel rumbling approaching our home. Soon after, a large red pickup truck emerged, and the placid driver could be seen through the driver's seat window with his ball cap and sun-drenched skin. It was Michael Box. He stepped down from the cab in an air of noticeable integrity and hard-working nature worn upon his face and dusty jeans. With a respect that sent chills, he took off his hat and shook our hands. "Nice to meet you both," he began in a modest, somewhat shy gesture. I liked him immediately. Finding a general contractor was of utmost importance, and it seems he was our first interviewee. The simple plans, just a couple pages, unrolled onto the front of his truck. I held one end and he held the other. We let him look at it, which he did. Silently and slowly his eyes moved through each print. I normally build small residential homes, he disclosed to us. This would be a new level of work for me, he continued, clearly intrigued. We openly shared our intentions. Mr. Box, we are building this dependent upon donations and do not even have a budget, but we believe God will guide us and provide all we need, I began. Many of these details will need to be decided as we go, even changed if a donation does not come in. So our hope is that we can manage the flow of supplies and time in a way that works for you to manage the project. Our need was so utterly unique, and I was quite glad he did not run away at that point. After all, we had no idea how easy or hard it would be. His eyes saw clearly. There is no way I could be the one to juggle the conversations around donations, he agreed. Looking at me, he said, "You do it." Me? I started laughing in disbelief. Yes, if you are the general contractor, you can hire me as a project manager, thoughtfully assessing his idea as he put it out there. His nod seemed to be the personal approval of the plan. I could see it would be a delicately interwoven relationship involving deep trust and a lot of dialogue. This arrangement would put him dependent on me and me on him. It felt right. I gave another yes. I said yes to being the general contractor. Just a wonderful example of when we give our big yes to an inspiration that we don't know what we're fully saying yes to all along the way. And I know you can relate. We're going to have lots of little yeses that reaffirm our step into the unknown. And our yes is part of the process of it becoming known. So I hope you enjoy the book, and whatever your experience is, I welcome you to email me. You can get a hold of me, KimberlyBraun.com, in every way, shape, and form. Take care, and thank you. Thank you for taking the journey of this video with me. And thank you, Boulder Bookstore, for giving me this opportunity to share my heart and myself.